Thanks, Daniel. There's a lot more than a sniff of hope. This is a tall lectern and I'm a short person. Good evening, everyone. There's never been a more exciting time to be a Republican. As Daniel and Brenton said, my name's Sophie Ismail. I'm the new federal Labor candidate for the seat of Melbourne. And it's a real pleasure to be here tonight to speak to you about a topic that I'm very passionate about, and that is the Australian Republic. I will do what my comrades did and acknowledge the traditional owners of this land, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nations. I acknowledge and pay my respects to their elders past and present, and I acknowledge their descendants as the bearers of a sovereignty that exists within and beyond the Australian nation. I would also like to acknowledge the fact that tomorrow is the 25-year anniversary of the report that was handed down by the Royal Commission into Aboriginal deaths in custody. And despite the fact that 25 years has passed and billions of dollars has been invested, the Indigenous incarceration rate has almost doubled. It is now 27% of our prisoner population are Indigenous. Indigenous people are twice as likely to end their own lives than the rest of us. And I think this wound on our national soul will not be healed until we move to properly recognise and respect the tens of thousands of years of history and culture and tradition that came before colonisation. And for me, that reason alone is enough to ditch the Queen without further ado. So we've been talking about an Australian Republic since 1901. Since the turn of the 20th century, the idea of an independent Australian nation has been discussed and debated. There have obviously been ups and downs over that period of time, but I really do believe that we're entering into a very new and exciting phase of this debate. As has been outlined, Labor has put a plan on the table, a four-step plan to get us to a republic in 10 years. And those four steps are, firstly, the appointment of a minister or a parliamentary secretary with responsibility for promoting a republic, which is an incredible step forward. A constitutional convention, followed by a plebiscite to determine the model, and a referendum finally to amend the constitution. And that is incredibly exciting. Malcolm, of course, our PM, is a Republican. He appears to have forgotten it, but we will continue to remind him. So why is this reform so crucial? For me, there are two reasons. Firstly, the need to recognise this country's black history, as I mentioned at the outset. And secondly, the need to bring multiculturalism back to the centre, the core of our Australian identity. And this is a topic that's very close to my heart personally. My dad is Indian. He was born in East Africa. He emigrated to the UK in the early 60s as a young man to study. And there he met my mum, a white working class girl from Nottingham. They married and had a family, and my family emigrated to Australia in 1988 to build a better life. And in many ways, growing up in the south of England was idyllic. It was an idyllic place to grow up. I remember climbing oak trees and catching frogs in a stream and, literally running through fields of gold. I also remember racism and alienation. I was the only brown kid in school outside of London. There is not a lot of racial diversity. It was pretty homogenous. And my multicultural family was the butt of many jokes. And obviously that was a very upsetting and traumatic experience. And then we immigrated to Australia. And there's one experience that I remember, and many of you will have heard this story, but I'm going to tell it again because it's a beautiful story. Within only a few months of arriving in Australia, I was presented with the Aussie of the Month award by my Year 5 teacher. And this was a great honour. I was thrilled. I was very, very excited. I was also a little confused about how I'd managed to win this award within only a month or so of being here. I thought, is it possible that the local competition is really that underwhelming? Of course it wasn't. It was a beautiful way of saying to me and saying to my family, you may only have been here for 5 minutes, but you're home, you're Australian, and you're no more or less Australian than anybody else here. And I've never ever forgotten that. I think coming back to the Republic, my family moved to Australia because it is not the UK, because it offered my multicultural family something different. It offered us inclusion, it offered us egalitarianism, it offered us generosity and unpretentiousness. and there's a strong and unique Australian identity that I believe simply cannot be represented by a constitutional monarchy.